We're just really excited for Kevin to join. And Kevin has an amazing experience from various amazing companies. So I will have Kevin introduce himself.
Hi everyone. Super excited to be here. Thanks for joining. I'm a product marketer sort of by trade, so to speak. But I have a really interesting background. I kind of stumbled my way into product marketing. So I'm an engineer by training. I worked at NVIDIA way back in the days. That's my first job. And looking back, I mean, now we all know kind of where NVIDIA is at. So I don't know if I should have stayed in hardware engineering or not. I landed. I was always passionate about startups and wanted to be a founder. I stumbled my way into a product marketing specialist role at Salesforce back in 2009. This is when product marketing wasn't even a known thing. No one wanted to be a PMM. But I was there for 6 years and I worked on Dreamforce keynotes. So it was a really interesting experience, just basically producing the technology that would go on the stage to 100,000 people, that was really cool. Then I tried to start up again, and then I ended up at a company that didn't work out. And I ended up at a company called AppDynamics, which is a very enterprise focused sales company. Very, very strong sales culture. And very much sales-led growth, right? Nearly 100%, right? Or close to it. That was great. And then I actually dabbled in product a little bit at WeWork. It's another story. But then recently, from 2020 to 2023, I was at Airtable. And so I joined Airtable at a really interesting time. They basically were just getting started with building out an enterprise motion at all, or even I wouldn't even say enterprise, I would just say a sales motion. And it was 180 employees when I joined. It was at the very beginning of the pandemic. And then company grew to almost 1,200 people at the peak, and saw a lot of interesting challenges while I was there. And when I joined Airtable, it was a very small marketing team. I think it was, I was the CMO's first hire, so it was just kind of 2 of us and a handful of folks. And so basically very little marketing. I'm just really passionate about product marketing, and now I'm doing consulting. So I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So just to set the context, so our audience knows, when you joined Airtable, what was the revenue, user, or marketing team size, and when you left, and what was it like? Yeah.
So obviously, I don't think I'm allowed to share exact numbers. I'm not sure how that works, but here's what I think. I'll give. I think I can share rough estimates just based on what's available. What you can search on Google. But the company, so 180 employees, basically fewer than I would say 5 marketers. Arguably people who are working on marketing. Revenue was somewhere in the ballpark of 40 to 50 to 60 million in ARR. 90% of that, close to it, was probably self-serve. Was self-serve. So that means just people paying with a credit card. So very, very small percentage of enterprise, meaning actually purchasing the enterprise package, the license that you can only buy through sales, that comes with SSO, higher limits, all that stuff, the stuff that you can only buy through a sales rep. I would say all the pipeline for reps were largely hand raisers. So just hand raiser as the pipeline. There were probably, I think at the time when I joined, maybe 10 to 15 salespeople at most, arguably, and all taking basically very, very, very warm accounts, active hand raisers, and then converting that to enterprise. And then by the time, so I left folks on the call, I left in April of 2023, so I can't speak sort of the past year, give or take, but when I left, you can look online. The revenue estimates are out there. It's anywhere between 200 to 300 million in ARR estimate. Can't give you guys any exact numbers, but I would say that more than half of the revenue shifted to enterprise by the time I left. So pretty significant shift.
And how big was the marketing team?
When I left, the marketing team was, I think, marketing hit about 100 folks at the peak.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I think when I left, the marketing was about 70 folks, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's. sizable team. I don't know if that's considered large or not, but yeah, 70 folks.
Yeah. It's really amazing to hear the journey, right? Like it's like what 5x, so 5 to 8x. So it's like a very fast growth, and especially marketing team. Marketing team is like 20x. That's a pretty amazing journey, and I'm really excited to go deeper into that. And today we're going to talk about product-led growth and sales-led growth, and all the challenges in between and how to make it work for companies. So before we even start, let's set the stage. What is product-led growth and what is sales-led growth in your mind, Kevin?
I was thinking about this question, and in classic product marketing fashion, I was like, well, there's lots of dimensions, that we could kind of like look at this, the definition. And I think the most obvious is just like revenue generation pipeline, right? Like, where is it coming from? Obviously, product-led growth is the product basically brings in users. I mean, you might, I guess you could argue the channels are wherever they come from, they sign up for the product. And then from that moment to when they monetize, it's kind of driven by the product, right? And that's people, it's very, very cost effective, uses a lot of growth sort of tactics and getting them to activate and educate, onboard, and then convert. And then on the sales-led growth side, I think the pipeline comes from marketing qualified leads. So you're bringing in folks through a campaign or some sort of external action, and or sales-led sort of pipeline generation, or PG. So salespeople just basically doing their own outbound with target accounts. But then you could also think about it as like, well, what about the buyer? The buyer changes, right? So I think about in the PLG world, it's just a user that kind of decides they want to pay, right? Versus on the sales-led side, it's likely selling an enterprise or some sort of solution to a team, in which case now you have to reach a buying committee. So you have to talk to multiple folks, right? Like if you ever been in a company and you have to buy software, you know how painful that is, even from the inside, right? You need a champion, you need an economic buyer, you need IT as deal influencers. You have people who don't like your product and are going to be detractors. So you have to deal with multiple people with different levels of influence and power. I also think of target audiences. So you have, in the world of sort of sales-led growth, you might have multiple target audiences that fit into that buying committee, right? Versus, say, on the PLG side, I think you probably look at the audience as a large swath. Like at Airtable, we basically looked at the audience as like, on the PLG side, was like creators, people who are likely to go and sort of like build things. Except the problem with that is, you go to Zoom Info and you look for, there's no one has a title, senior manager of creators, of like the senior manager of creation. Like, yeah, they do have titles, but it's very, very broad, like operations. But honestly, creators for Airtable came from everywhere, literally everywhere. Like you could have someone who's an analyst who builds an amazing app. You could have a director of something that ended up building an Airtable thing. So I look at that too. And then product design. So who is the product designed for? If you want to go after an enterprise audience, there's a lot of functionality you have to build. It's exceptionally expensive. And that's another thing I think we'll get to that, but the focus of your product org changes significantly, and that power shifts. And then obviously the strategy of the company. So are you trying to win enterprise? Like, do you want to grow as a company through larger accounts? So all those things I think have those are different angles I think that define product-led versus sales-led. Yeah.
I really like what you're saying. It's not only sort of the go-to-market motion. You look at revenue generation, of course, but also like the buyer, the target audience, the product, and the overall strategy of the company.
Yeah.
And like, why do you think so many PLG companies want to build a sales motion? Could they just stay in PLG forever?
I mean, I have this thing that I like to, I think I shared this with you guys yesterday, but I have this like, like in chemistry or physics, there's like the laws of thermodynamics, or like, these like unbreakable laws of physics. I have this thing that I like to say, which is like, what's the first law of SaaS dynamics? And it's like every venture-backed sort of software company must become like an enterprise software company, or like let's say like not if you're like a pure, like not if you're like pure B2C, but like let's say like you sell some kind of BDC oriented like productivity or work related tool. All those companies I think have to evolve into an enterprise company, or else they'll basically become irrelevant. And I just call it like an unbreakable law. I think that's I think it's because like like there's this, it's just basically growth, right? Like, so the way I look at it is, you're venture backed, you have to maintain a certain level of growth. You just have to. The pressure from your board and your investors are just massive. So for the founder, they like, I think for the first couple of years, like you look at Airtable, right? I mean, when I joined, the company is doing amazingly well off the backs of credit card conversions, literally, basically like no marketing and sales. Incredible. The problem is, you can only grow that fast for so long, right? Like everything, have you guys ever heard of the S curve of growth? Like, like if you're ever like, so for example, if you're learning something new, like an instrument, like it starts really slow, it's hard. And then you reach this like point where you're like getting a lot, like you're advancing really quickly. And then eventually you hit another point where your learning kind of like tapers off, right? Like everything, like a lot of things in nature like follow the S curve. And it's the same with like with revenue growth. Like you can't maintain that level of growth forever. And so at some point you're like, okay, well, where are we going to find the dollars? And then naturally, I think for a lot of these PLG companies, they realize like, oh, well, there's a lot of companies that are pretty large, where certain power users in large companies found the product and started showing people, right? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, there's an opportunity here. And it's almost like it's natural. And then I think when the dollars sort of are put in front of like an executive team, it's hard to say no, right? And enterprise dollar is worth so much more. Like, if you do like at Airtable, I think like one enterprise dollar is worth like 10 like self-serve dollars in terms of like the potential growth, like the NDR, right? So like the enterprise NDR was just insanely higher than the sort of like self-serve NDR, right? And so I just feel like it's, I don't know, what do you guys think? Like I feel like there's so much pressure and it's so enticing that it's hard to stop.
Yeah, I feel for self-serve, users are typically considered individuals. So like individual use cases, or they have a couple of people in their smaller team. So the expansion motion is not necessarily innate for a lot of products, versus if we sell into enterprise, by nature, it is a organization and there's connections within the organization. So the expansion motion of, Department A use X, and so Department B also use X is a lot more natural. And then when they expand, it's expanding to another department of another, 20, 200 or 2,000 people, versus a self-serve expansion is like individual on the like single digit perspective.
So I have, oh, sorry, wanted a random question, because I know a lot of the smaller companies are going after, right, are looking up to Airtable and to be an imitator or want to live up to it. For any new startup to think about the growth strategy, should they still, if enterprise is so good, right, should they still even try PLG at all? Should they, why not jump right into the SLG in day one?
I think it has a lot to do with like what you're building, what's your product, what's your company. I would start with that instead of thinking about like, do I want to be a PLG company or an SLG company? Like I would say like, okay, well, what are you building? So for example, I have a client and they do employee experience software. Like they do kind of like software that's designed for HR teams, for comms teams, internal comms, IT teams. So, it's like, it wouldn't make sense for them to do PLG, right? Because at the end of the day, like if you're going to get some software into an HR team, like you just have to get to the CHRO or CPO. So I don't know, so I would, if I was talking to a founder, like, oh, well, what should I do? I'd say, well, okay, first of all, what problem are you solving for your customer? Is this a problem that like individuals have? Like, can I, if you actually like take a step back and look at most PLG companies, like I hate to say it, but they all orbit around work management for the most part, like collaborative work management. Like whether it's something that individuals do for productivity. A lot of these PLG companies, I think, are sort of like productivity based. I mean, there's some that obviously have other sort of adjacent teams, but so many of these products are sort of like productivity. There's a reason why. It's because like every worker needs some help doing something with their job, and so that makes a lot of sense. I think if it depends on where you're, so like let's assume for a moment that you do have a product, like some tool that I guess could be either path. I don't know. I think the PLG motion is amazing, like to start out with, because I feel like it's just like it's almost like the accepted path now, right? For a lot of, if you're building a product like that, it doesn't really make sense to bring on a salesperson, I think, unless there's something about that tool that you just have to be brought in, right? At a very high level. For example, if you were doing like a data product, like another client I have, they do a data product. And so they need access to the Kafka and like Snowflake or Redshift. Like they need access to like data warehouses. Like, you could try to sell that to some level 1 analyst, like, but they may not even be able to connect to, like your Snowflake instance to pull, all your sort of like, BI data, right? So I would start there. I don't know. It's like, don't design to solve the problem that your customers have, and then think about what is the right go-to-market strategy to reach that person, right? The most effective way. And it may turn out that going sales-led is like the way to go, right? I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question, Dave, but like that's exactly what I would tell a founder. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. I actually do remember a data science tool reach out to me asking me to use it. I really like the tool, but even at the time, I want the team to adapt. I'm still getting shut down by the eng team, right, for not able to access to any random tool just so easily. Cool, that's helpful. Let's continue. Thank you.
So we established, right, like PLG going a market and into a sales motion, especially in a VC funded environment. that's also like another factor, right? Like in order to keep like hyper growth, enterprise is a very natural place to go. And if you're not venture funded or you don't have like very aggressive growth goals, and you can keep PLG and self-serve for a while. So let's assume, right, like you want to go to a sales-led motion, you want to go on market. What are the signs? How do you know when is the time you need to think about investing in a sales motion?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think like I'm a product marketer, so I don't have like the deep sort of demand gen angle of I'm sure like if you're like a demand gen expert, you can look at the number of signups and the cost of that to drive that top of funnel. You can look at the activation rate. You can look at the conversion to monetize, and you could probably figure out when the right point at which the growth rate hits some percentage, and then you can do the math. I'm not good at that stuff. This is why you guys, I work with y'all in the community, but I think like at least from an Airtable perspective, like a couple of things happened, and it's never one thing. I think in my mind, there's lots of factors that sort of drive, I think, a company decide, oh, okay, well, it looks like the signs are there that we could unlock like some sort of sales motion, right? I think first of all, I mean, some of the signs are top of funnel organic signups are sort of like flattening out, right? If you think about at least in the Airtable realm, right? And this is very specific for folks who've never used Airtable. This might be like completely random, but like Airtable really depends on building a solution. It's a tool that you have to understand. For example, the basics of database concepts, right? Like if you've ever Airtables, if you look at companies like Notion or Coda or ClickUp, I think they took from that Airtable concept, but you need someone who's willing to build. So those people, like they are, if you look at like any sort of crossing the chasm, they're like the power users, right? And so you can't, like, once you reach a certain number of those folks, it's not like you're going to be finding them like everywhere. and they have a certain mindset, and this might be true for different companies, but it takes there's nothing you can do to create more people who have that personality type in the world. Okay, so like you're gonna hit that limit. So that's one. I think second thing is like competition. So Airtable was founded started in 2012 and then kind of launched in 2014, 2015. Like Notion came along later. So if you look at this community of people, right, they're obsessed with cool new tools, and there's always going to be some competitors on your heels nipping at your your ankles essentially. So you have to look at like, well, you can't no matter what, someone's going to come along and start chipping away at your bottom. Okay, that's just gonna it's impossible that it won't happen, right? Especially if you've proven success. Like there will be other competitors that will come in, and it's gonna be too difficult for you to switch your products to protect the base. I mean, you can, but it will be hard. I think self-serve revenue growth, flat or falling, that kind of connects to the previous idea. Activation rates again, and then I think these are really interesting. Like I think you would look at your largest accounts, right? From Airtable's perspective, the top accounts were already crossing like large contracts. When I mean large, I'm talking north of 100, 200, 500, a million, right? Like if you have a large account that is crossing that threshold, I mean, you can't close a $50,000 account without a human being, or even 25,000. I mean, maybe you can, but I would be very shocked if an end user could somehow push through a $50,000 contract without anyone approving it up the chain. I mean, maybe there's a few companies out there that allow that sort of purchasing power to an IC, but I would be shocked. So do you see these accounts that are already there that were opportunistic? Like you're just there like, well, why wouldn't we take the money, right? You see that sort of proof. And then, I think product market fit. Do you have the product that can actually sell into an actual account, right? And land a solution for a problem. And then, and so, and if you're hitting a ACV of maybe 20, 25K, I think that's like the sort of the bar. Like people ask like, well, what's like the bar to hire a rep? I think you're supposed to get to at least like 15, 20, 25K in ACV to justify the cost of a rep, right? So I don't know, those are all things that I think were good signs at least for Airtable.
Yeah. I really like what you said is like for a growth marketer, we often talk about, okay, like you reach 5 million ARR, maybe it's time to start thinking about sales led, or you reach like 50 million ARR, you probably would want to so I've seen that talking of like 5 million, 50 million, and then that range. People say it's time for PLG companies to think about SLG. And what I really like what you said is like, okay, what are the signs other than a revenue volume, which is quite arbitrary, right? Like I've seen 5 and I've seen 50. So like the top of funnel organic competition, activation rate, self-serve revenue, and also just like the signals you get. I still remember at a certain point, like just IT teams started reaching out to us and said, oh, like just adding up all the credit card reimbursements, it's a lot, and we want a enterprise plan. Like they just like came to Slack and say, oh yeah, we need a plan, and we need to control the access to all these people with our data now. So sometimes it's like what are your customers are proactively asking for is a signal.
I would say like I would say like I have a thought about that, which is like I would add that that's a great sign of basically IT saying I need to consolidate the spend, right? And then you could argue, well, you should upgrade to our enterprise plan, and then you can use ACH, and we'll send you an invoice, and blah blah blah, like, and we'll give you SSO. That's like I call that like lazy upgrading, which is great. You kind of want it, right? But I would challenge any sort of like founder leader to say like, are you actually solving a business problem, not the end user problem, right? Like, yeah, you probably are, right? You probably are solving a business challenge, but have you thought about why? Because I think if IT is just coming to consolidate spend, I think you're at risk of being contracted because they don't understand why. They're only doing this because they don't want to, they're trying to get a discount using procurement teams to beat you up on the deal, right? Like, I would say, like, are you actually driving revenue for them? Are you reducing cost? Are you mitigating risk for that company? And if the IT leader doesn't understand the strategic value of your software, then I think that's like a lazy upgrade. Sorry, I'm a lazy, enterprise plan, right? Like,
Yeah. That's such a great point. It reminds me of like one of my clients in no code platform, and they have individual users using it, building stuff like, the makers, the builders that you just mentioned. However, like, so they're thinking about, okay, is it time to build a sales team? And the challenge they have is, when they actually reach out to the bigger companies who have the individual users, and those companies, all they want is SSO. Like, they're like, the only thing that's missing from your individual plan or self-serve plan is SSO. Like, give it to us, and then we don't need anything else. So like they're in this like exploration phase. Is like, what else is the value that we can add?
Yeah,
So,
and by the way, like, Airtable was guilty of it just as much as, like, there's a whole website that's like SSO tax. So I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's like, if you just SSO tax, it's like it lists all these companies that force you to upgrade to get SSO, and I don't know, it's like almost like a joke, but I would say, like, definitely think about what the value is that you're doing for, like, that you're providing the company, your customer, and not just convenience upgrading.
yeah, and those value could be maybe like security, admin. What else? It's like,
that is, I think that's like a, like a definitely a value. So the way, what I mean value is, I'll give you an example. At Airtable, when I joined, one of the first things that we did, and this was like, my CMO was also basically pushing this, which I think was a fantastic idea. We went to the data science team and we had them do a use case study. So we had them correlate Salesforce opportunity data with product use case data. So you could see which use cases led to the largest expansion. Now, that didn't take into account the folks that didn't. So it's survivorship bias, obviously, because there are a lot of accounts that never went to enterprise, and we don't know what use cases they were using, right? But we found very clear patterns for what solutions would be landing in enterprises, right? And so when I talk about value, I think if you're going to, for example, if Airtable is selling into a marketing team, right? Let's say there's like 100 users, that's 50K in ACV, okay? Are we driving campaign velocity? Are we helping produce more content better? Are we reducing the risk of marketing operations in terms of, how hard it is to launch a campaign in marketing that's integrated? Email, social, comms, analysts, sales enablement. Like, there's some things that Airtable can do, and a lot of companies can do, but they focus on this. Like marketing teams, for example, you would need to go to the CMO and you need to explain why, if you purchase this software, I'm going to accelerate your ability to drive pipeline in the market. I'm going to reduce the cost of your tech spend by consolidating X number of tools, right? And yes, you also get the security and the administration, but that's for IT. Like, you need to check IT's box, but for a product like an Airtable, you need the champion in some function or multiple functions. And then the economic buyer is likely going to be the CIO, like at some point, right? But that's what I mean by value is, are you doing something for the company? So, I'll give one more example, which is like Airtable does really well with entertainment companies, media entertainment. Literally, like companies studios that produce content, they live and die by the amount of content they produce to drive subscriptions for a streaming service. And so, a product like an Airtable can accelerate the production of content for TV or movie or film, and also reduce the cost it takes to put in post-production. That's the type of thing you want to be able to take to an executive producer and show them that you can solve that problem. Not, guess what, 10 people are using my thing, 50 people are using my product. Should you just consolidate the credit card spend to a PO?
That's such a great point, like a critical point, right? It's like beyond the IT benefits and security benefits, what is the business value, the core value you're driving for the enterprise that the individual use case cannot drive, right? You can, like, Airtable phases, like, okay, like multiple departments or multiple work streams can now collaborate on one product together, or one project together. In like a video recording use case, yes, you can share your videos, but now if you have a shared library for all of your sales reps, and now they can do better pitching, or like the examples like this is like, what's the business benefits and enterprise use cases that we can add for a sales motion. That's a critical piece that a lot of startups is like. It sounds simple when we talk about this, but I think a lot of PLG companies are still struggling to find that business enterprise use case. Well, why is it so hard then? Like, now we're on the topic. Why is it so hard to layer on the sales motion or effective sales motion?
I was thinking when I was at Airtable, I was thinking about this a lot, all the time. If I had to zoom like all the way out, okay, for a moment, like yes, like let's just say there's, from a marketing perspective, there's a lot that has to change in sort of the channels, the marketing mix, all stuff. There's a lot of stuff there. Okay, I would say this is just, again, my opinion. I think that layering on an additional go-to-market motion, it's not about, by the way, it's not about changing from PLG to sales-led. It's about figuring out how to make them work together, right? Like, that's the hard thing. People think it's like, in the product marketing world, there's like self-serve PMMs, like enterprise PMMs. Like, that, I don't really think about it that way. It's honestly the same journey. Like, if you have a bunch of users that sign up for your product, and then eventually, like you need to sell them an enterprise plan, those people are still involved. Like, they should be, right? But in any case, like, I think that the challenge is that it just requires more resources, and it's a different focus. Like, it's kind of like, and they're really different motions. It's almost like, what's a good analogy for this? Like, let's say, like, I don't know, you have a team of swimmers, and like now they need to run. Like, some of those swimmers are probably gonna, like, let's say you have like Olympic swimmers, and then you have like Olympic track and field, and like, they're like, some of your swimmers have to now learn how to like run and race. Like, not all of them are gonna be good at that, right? So you're gonna want to bring in people who are like really good at running, but like, I don't know, like, let's say there was like a relay perhaps, where maybe the swimmer has to get out of the pool, or maybe the runner has to start in the pool, and then the swimmer has to come out of the pool, and then like there's a point where, I don't know, this, by the way, I love making analogies that are really stupid. I like test driving them, so bear with me for a moment. But I think a lot of PLG companies will take those swimmers and say, and a big chunk of the swimmers, and say, you guys are now going to race, the 1,000 meter, 500 meter dash, or 100 meter dash, 50 meter dash. And they're like, what are you talking about, right? And then what happens is like, well, then what happens? Like, oh, well, they're doing okay. They don't really get it. So what are we going to do? We're going to bring people from outside who know how to run. And then they're going to come in, and then they're going to bring their culture into the company. They're going to bring their friends. And all of a sudden, I really think the reason why it's so hard is not just because it's a different motion. It is a massive cultural, strategic, and resource shift that the company has to evolve through. And it's a very human problem. I hate to say this, but it is a very human problem. How do you do this without like alienating all these people who kind of got you here, as you bring in external like people who bring in a wildly different culture and end up and like it's like a meteor crashing into the planet, right? So I think, like, if I was talking to a founder, I'd tell them, like, you need to worry about this, because at the end of the day, like, we'll figure out the motion, but you need to figure out how to layer in this aspect of the cultural shift in your company the right way. Because if you just bring in all these salespeople and bring in all these like enterprise folks, like it's a lot of risk. It's people will leave for sure, because the shift, the energy of the company is shifting. right? So if you were, for example, I think the people who get hurt a lot in this transition are growth PMs or PMM or like self-serve PMMs that effectively they're doing growth. I think like the growth role, I don't know, this could be like another law of like like SaaS dynamics. I think like the growth team is either going to fall on the marketing side or the product side. I don't know, like there's not like they have like they kind of sit between marketing and product. And as the focus goes to enterprise, like they're they're going to get less attention. And so I think that's the hardest thing. Now we could talk about like training, like I'm happy to go anywhere there, but like the next thing I would say is like educating the marketing team on what it means to sell into what does it mean to go from driving a conversion on the credit card to assisting a salesperson with pipeline and helping them drive the deal. Like that's a huge change. If you're like a marketing leader and you've had full control over this experience and you're driving revenue for the company, and all of a sudden there are sales reps now that close the deal. That's like a huge change for people who aren't familiar with, who don't understand like what it means to rely on a sales team and rely on enablement to close deals, right? I think it feels like like if you've never, I think it's hard for a lot of marketing folks who may feel that that's like, I wouldn't say like subservience to sales, but like deep partnership with the sales team and reliance. Like as a PMM, it's in the enterprise context for PMMs, like our job is to drive pipeline for sales. That's our job. If you're not generating pipeline for sales, then what are you doing? Like, if the company's goal is to close enterprise revenue, right? Like, I don't know, but I think like there's a lot there, but at least that, from my perspective, that's kind of why I think it's so hard. That's a big answer.
Yeah, I resonate with what you said about the people piece, because in PLG we focus on scale. So we use a lot of the more B2C go-to-market motion as a growth oriented marketer. Like I know when I look for PLG growth team, it's really about their volume driving activities. So the channels are very different and the mindset is very different. They do massive experiments so that we can drive volume, versus a sales-led enterprise motion. It's very much about targeting the right people, personalize the experience as high quality of a high win rate as possible. And you could be driving 100 leads, but if 50% of them actually convert into pipeline, and you're doing a great job. So like the measurement is different, and the channels are also very different, right? It's like the scale of it is very different. So like I think in that motion, you almost need to hire team with different skill sets in order to fulfill that new reality.
And like think about the distraction. I think about like if you're selling an enterprise solution, you need customer success, you need support, you need to fill the product gaps. Like it's distracting. It's not just like it's not just a go-to-market evolution, right? It's a whole company evolution. That's hard, right? It's a whole company evolution, right? And it's very distracting for go-to-market as well, right? Like
Yeah, I have worked with PLG companies going on market, and I've also worked with sales-led companies wanting to do PLG. I would say the concern for cannibalization is a real one. So on one hand, PLG limits the deal size for enterprise, or there could be missing opportunities, and that's why you want to do sales led. But once like a sales team also is concerned about missing the leads, and then they want to control all the leads, and they don't want PLG to touch the folks that comes in. So there's just like this who controls what piece that we need to establish the rule of engagement so that we know sending the right people to the right teams.
You know what's funny here? Here's something that I think at least I didn't really. It surprised me when I thought about it a little bit, and it might be helpful for folks. Okay, like if a director signs up for your PLG product, if they show up, let's say not sign up, let's say like a director appears on your website for a PLG product or VP. Let's just be aggressive and say a VP shows up on your site. Do you want them to sign up for your product, or do you want them to talk to sales? And if you look at these PLG companies, everything they do was to drive a sign up. Every single, make the button huge, like every growth tactic to drive a 0.0001% conversion rate, A/B test on a sign up link. If you send that VP into your PLG product, which probably has like average active onboarding, honestly, probably because you've been scrambling so hard to build the product, that is a horrible experience for a VP. Like, and it, like you explain, like you cannot send this person here. I would, if a VP at Coca-Cola shows up on the site and says, I'm interested, I want that person talking to our best AE and our best SE. You know, I don't want them to go in the product. If they go in the product, they're gonna look around and be like, this thing sucks. They're gonna leave, right? So think about that for a moment. Right? I don't know. I think that's, I don't know. I think that's yeah, something to think about, because there are many situations where the thing that you've lived by, this beautiful product, which has been the North Star of the founder and the whole company, all of a sudden does not matter when someone comes in, because it actually can be worse for them. I don't know, just something to, it's not true for everything, but something worthy to consider if you are thinking about an evolution. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we mentioned about like how important that is for like the right team to tackle the different motion, right? Like what, how do you organize teams to tackle PLG and SLG? Like, do you have the central team that tackles both at the same time, or do you organize by functional? So an example I have is, okay, like maybe for PMM, you can have separate dedicated PMMs for PLG core product versus enterprise motion. Maybe for demand gen, you have your central team with different channels, and the channel owners do both PLG and sales-led type of campaigns. Or maybe you can have like separate teams for PLG and enterprise channels. So how have you seen organizations tackle the PLG versus SLG teams?
Yeah, I mean, I can only, again, I really can only speak to sort of like product marketing and sort of what we did. You know, these org design thing is really important. I think it's going to be, I think every company, as they sort of layer on, they're going to start shifting people around and creating new teams and whatnot. At least, so I'll talk about PMM for a moment. Like on the product marketing side, right? Sort of PMMs in the PLG world, they're very much kind of like sitting growth, right? Like they kind of straddle growth a little bit. They're focused on, you know, onboarding activation. So how do you get someone to educate, right? Education, learning, development. They have community PMMs that are driving sort of community efforts to get more and more users to spread word of mouth and help each other and develop that really great sort of foundation of users. You know, there's monetization PMMs that think about how to get people to convert, to pay, and there's like packaging pricing as well. You know, at Airtable, I think when we sort of layer on the sales motion, right, you kind of go from like, if, for example, there's maybe a PMM that does release stuff that pushes out new features, and in the PMM world for enterprise, like you might have a launch PMM team that focuses on launching, and launching and releasing are very different things, right? Releasing is just pushing a feature out. Launching is making a statement in the market that's strategic to the company, right? You have solutions product marketing, which is thinking about what is the actual solution we're selling. Not, you know, solution can be a number of use cases, for example, but really solving a core business problem. We have competitive intelligence product marketing. We have platform, partner ecosystem product marketing. We have analyst relations product marketing. Like these are all the things that you have to add on from a product marketing perspective. Like, you know, but I don't know if there's anything like special about the way the other teams are organized. Like we still had a content team, we still have a creative team, we still have a comms team, we still had a marketing ops and technology team, we still had a, you know, field marketing team if we, you know, sort of doing field events. But I think like the it's not about it's maybe a little less about the org and about what they're doing to drive growth across additional channels, right? Yeah, but again, I can't speak to the other teams. I'm sure the marketing, like tech and like Martech and strategy ops team have to completely change by bringing in like all these new tools like Marketo or something like that. You know, like again, I'm not an expert there, but there's probably a lot happens in certain teams more so than others. PMM probably has to evolve a lot, and I'm guessing like demand gen has to retool probably as well. Yeah, I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, even when you have a central team that manages both self-serve and enterprise, naturally there could be more focus of a certain people based on their channel. Like an example would be like LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn by nature, it is more of an enterprise channel versus a Google search ads is by nature more a self-serve channel. So sometimes it's just like the person who manage Google search ads tend to focus more or spend like majority of their time on self-serve keywords or campaigns, and versus the LinkedIn person ends up being in more like enterprise marketing meetings. And how does the role evolve during this time? Like you mentioned that working on competitive intelligence, analyst relations. Do you see the PMM role evolve during the sales slide motion?
I mean, absolutely. The biggest aspect, I think for at least from again, this is a product market perspective, I think sales enablement is like a big sort of leap for the product market perspective, right? Like it's this, you have to develop materials, training that can take a new AE that knows nothing about buyers, the market, product, landscape, and make them productive. Basically, like, should they get them to the point where they're hitting 100% of quota on the ramp over usually a AE ramp is going to be like 2 or 3 quarters maybe, but like, so you got to think about like all the things. So that's like enablement, just purely education and training and materials. You have to build that. All that has to exist now, because before that was nothing there, right? It's like you kind of had PMMs that could do like some launching motion, releasing, launching. You kind of have folks that can do that, but usually this is going to be a net new function, at least in product marketing. I think that's one of the biggest. I think again, analyst relations, that's kind of a specialized thing. Competitive intelligence, you mentioned. What else did we add? Like, it's just I mean, I'd say that's the biggest thing. It's it's like sometimes a PMM's job is to build a deck, like for a sales team. It's true. I hate to say it, but it is very true. And then the other aspect is campaigns. So again, I think like there's motions that are designed to drive like organic signups, for example, or like get signups through. And then there's like campaigns integrated that combine field motions with sort of digital motions, right? Like, what content are you targeting people who are in the buying committee that aren't going to sign up? So you have to think about how do you develop that journey that's a separate journey alongside the user that's signing up potentially, right? So that's hard. Like, think about like, at Airtable, I created this like huge document in Lucid chart, which was like showcasing like what is the standard of like these things are moving at the same time, right? Usually the user signs up first, not always the case, but they're activating, and then there's like a sales rep that reaches out to a director, and then you have like these 2 separate journeys that go like this, and then you introduce IT at like some stage of the opportunity. Like, so you have to expand your funnel beyond like monetization to include sales stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, discovery, new business meeting, evaluation, proof of concept, proposal, negotiation, close 1. What are you doing as a marketing team like along that journey too? So I think that requires like new thinking from product marketing as well, of like, because a lot of the tactics you use aren't effective when it's a late stage opportunity, right? Like an executive dinner might be the best lever you have, like versus like a million ebooks or something. I don't know. Yeah, these are just things that we have to develop.
One last thing I want to ask, because it's something that I personally very interested in. It's an exercise we're doing at one of my clients is pricing and packaging. And for self-serve, it's much easier. It was like, okay, like per user, like $5 per user, $10 per user, pro plan, maybe like $20 per, like it feels like a lot more straightforward versus enterprise pricing and packaging. It feels like a much involved process. And how do you price this? And like, how do people think about the value of enterprise? Like, what have you gone through in pricing and packaging in this PLG to SLG evolution?
So I'll be honest. I am not a pricing and packaging expert. I think there are a lot of product marketers out there who are very, very good at this. It's almost like an analyst partial, like you're almost like an analyst as well as a product marketing person. So at Airtable, we ended up hiring like a external firm to help us with this, and they exist out there, and they're pricey. Like here's. Again, I'm not an expert, so take this with a grain of salt. But I think of like packaging and pricing as like what problem are you solving that warrants a higher price point? Like so like if you think about like a journey, right? Like you want a customer to upgrade and you want them to spend more with you, but if they're going to spend more with you, then you need to be solving a equivalent or proportional level of pain for that company, right? And so I think like with this user-based pricing, like you want them to upgrade. Maybe there's different levels, right? Like, well, like I guess in the Salesforce world, you just keep adding more for like different clouds, right? But it's like like start with the value you're creating and figure out what is that value, and then how do you price against that instead of like I think if you start there, then you can figure out the right ranges for pricing and also the right gating for features. Like I think if you come from an angle from like the PLG angle, you're thinking about like what can I gate to force them to have a like it's almost like how can we put something somewhere where it forces them to have to pay us more or something. Like and you're trying to figure out like, well, like where is that like least annoying for a power user who won't be angry and go to the community and complain about something like, oh, why can't I do this? Like if it like certain features, right? Like it's always hard. Like I'll give like for example, I think in the Airtable realm, like the Salesforce integration is enterprise, because there's no reason why like a very small mom and pop shop of like 10 people would ever need a Salesforce. Like those things are obvious, right? You want to gate, but it's like price at the point of value, and think about what problems, if you're asking them to spend more, what bigger problem are you solving for them, and how much is that problem worth to them to solve? That's like my angle. And then obviously you want the experts to come in and they do all this analysis of like you want them to analyze like price point against adoption of certain features. Like you almost see like I bet if you look at your data, you could see which features were being used more regularly by certain segments, and you might identify patterns there, right? And then you're gonna have to draw a line somewhere and do like some sort of ARR sacrifice. Like I would just say like, I've always felt like be generous, like give more functionality, and be willing to sacrifice some ARR if the goal is to drive more adoption of your product, to drive more expansion. And to not be cheap, like don't be cheap with the features, right? And again, I'm not an expert here, but that's my sort of point of view when I look at pricing packaging.
Yeah. Like I think also a lot of people think pricing is permanent. It is not. Right? It's okay to change your pricing. It's okay to like launch something and see how that impacts our bottom line or how user reacts to it, and then change it 6 months later. Like we're like, especially for tech companies and people are used to it, you want to be conscious on like, okay, when we change pricing, how do we deal with the existing users? Do we grandfather them in? Do we, keep like set a later date that they can also transfer? So you need to think through the transition plan, but you can change. So and also at different stages of company, you want to change. So pricing is something that every company is asking for, especially with a lot of the AI companies, and I deal with a lot of like how do we do pricing today? But my advice is always like, okay, let's do a survey, let's do customer interviews, and let's look at the usage data of feature adoption to understand what's the trigger for a higher level of pricing, and then we can always change 6 months later, 12 months later.
Yeah. And in the enterprise realm, they're going to discount it anyway. Like there's going to be some big discounts that get approved. I think I'm not, PLG pricing is I'm not an expert. And the enterprise side, I would just say there's going to be a huge discount range depending on how much they're willing to spend and all that stuff, right? There's so this requires a big, deep expertise. And, but I always go back to, if you're going to ask someone to spend more, what bigger problem or what more valuable problem or additional problem are you solving? And how valuable is that to the customer? Like how much are they spending today? And you can do that math, right? But you need to understand how much the customer is actually spending or opportunity cost, losing for that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Kevin, I so enjoyed this conversation, and apologies to the audience. I enjoyed it so much that we're at time. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Bei, for manning the community and the discussion. Rochelle, I saw your notes around the organization, and Josh and everyone, James, thank you for participating. And thank you, Kevin, for attending.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone. If any questions, I actually do have my own questions, but maybe feel free to post or connect us. I'm gonna ask more later on. So this is a meaty topic.
Yeah, we can also go to the community, and we do have the launch that we can continue the conversation. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.